Hello, this is Bad Vibes. Today's video is a mixture of sleepover and babysitting stories. Please hit that thumbs up if you enjoy the video and sit back and relax. About 10 years ago, when I was 15, my Aunt Jo, best friend Lynn, and I decided on a whim to have a sleepover. We had gathered in my Nan Jo's house and were watching films, eating pizza and snacks, and it got to around 11 p.m., so we decided to stay over instead of going home. We went to bed around midnight and decided to all stay in Jo's double bed, top and tail. We didn't go to sleep straight away, of course. We were gossiping and messing around, as teenage girls do. It got to around 1 a.m. and we decided to try to sleep, so we turned off all the lights and got into bed. We still didn't sleep right away. We were making jokes and laughing in the dark while fighting over the quilt. Jo's room is on the second floor and is laid out in this way. Walking in the door, the bed and the window are straight ahead of you, with the top of each bed against the wall. I was sleeping at the end, so I laid my head on the wall end, while Jo and Lynn slept the other way around with a view of the window. I was slowly beginning to drift off to sleep, but kept hearing this noise that sounded like a bit of something scraping against the wall outside. I tried to ignore it, but it kept me awake, so I laid there in the dark with my eyes open and waited for exhaustion to take over. All of a sudden, Jo screamed, jumped out of the bed, and said, "Get away from my window!" Lynn then started screaming, and I looked at the window to see what was happening. I saw a silhouette of a person with their arms raised. We ran downstairs screaming for my Nan, who had rushed out of the living room to see what all the noise was about. Jo was crying at this point, while Lynn and I were just in shock, and we each tried to explain what just had happened. Once we finally got it out, my Nan called the police and went upstairs with a bat to see if the person was still there. They weren't. The police turned up and took our statements, checked the area and came up with nothing, but gave us another number to call should anything suspicious happen or the guy returned. We decided to sleep downstairs instead of going back upstairs to Jo's room. We were panicked and frightened, but Jo was still in a state. Lynn and I tried to calm her down by saying he was gone and we would call the police if he came back, but Jo looked us both in the eyes and told us something that makes my skin crawl when I think about it now. See, Jo lives in a big Victorian-style house in a quiet area, and while there's a roof right underneath her window, she always locks the window before sleeping, and the lock is easily visible. This guy, climbed up the roof and tried to open Jo's window. The guy had raised his arms though, which confused me until Jo told me that her window can open both ways. She often opened it from the top instead of the bottom. This guy had clearly been watching her house for at least a day and had decided to strike at night, but luckily we had been there having the sleepover and saw him. Had Jo been alone that night, she would have been laying on her bed normally and wouldn't have seen the silhouette. So to the guy that was watching my aunt and tried to break in and rob her or something worse, let's never meet. When I was in high school, I was like 16. I had a friend, Lisa, and a second friend, Zoe. Lisa had like a lot of money, and her huge house was located right next to our high school. So every time we had a break or anything, the three of us would go there. We also would have a lot of sleepovers at her house. It was this huge rich people house, so it was awesome to stay there. So one day, we decided to stay the night there. The three of us, plus Lisa's little sister, Anna. Their mother was gone for the night. We decided to put on some PJs and watch scary movies for hours. Anna went to bed before the three of us, and we just stayed in the living room, watching TV. At one point, the alarm goes off. It happens sometimes, so Lisa just turned it off, and that was it. But then, like 10 minutes later, the alarm goes off again. And it scared us because it's not supposed to. Technically, the alarm was made only to ring when humans come by, because the house is located in the middle of the forest, so we all knew that sometimes animals would come up to the house. Happened before. So when the alarm was installed, it was calibrated in a way for humans only, and it was the second time it rang. We started to get a little bit scared, so we went upstairs, opened the windows to look into the garden all around the house, and nothing. We even went on the balcony in the middle of the night. Nothing. I was alone on the balcony at some point, and the alarm went off again, and the automatic lights around the swimming pool turned on. This meant something was around the pool, and I was just above it. I got so scared I got on my knees and stayed there until my friend deactivated the alarm and the lights, and I ran inside. At this point, we were really scared and started thinking about what it could be. If it has to be any human, all of our lights were on, so they knew we were there. We turned all the lights off, and all four of us went hiding downstairs in the kitchen without our phones. I don't even know why not even one of us thought of taking at least one phone. So we were there, lights off, scared in a huge house with windows everywhere we could look. The alarm went berserk again. Anna screamed. Lisa took her with her, reassuring her while she walked to shut off the alarm, like turn it off once and for all. So I was in the kitchen with Zoe only, and we were just looking all around us. The alarm was upstairs, so the two girls were far from us. At some point, we heard footsteps right beside us, like right on the other side of the wall, in the garden. It was fast, not scared, just fast, like a person knew where they were going. So we just froze, waiting in the dark, and jumped when someone, walked by the door right in front of us. We think it was a he, had a light, but it was another light that allowed us to see a silhouette. So there were at least two of them running around the house for about at least 20 to 30 minutes. This door was, like I said, a window door, but there were vinyl blinds on it. They were not closed, of course. We were still not moving, and the girls upstairs were so scared that they stayed there. At least, it's what they told us. Suddenly, one voice, then a second one. I was unable to understand anything, but I heard it, and Zoe and I were blinded by a sudden light right at our faces. We were literally not able to move, scream, talk. Not anything we could have done was possible. We were just frozen in fear. The light just stayed there. Someone was looking at us through the blinds. Someone was watching us being scared and was just staying there. Suddenly, we heard a hard sound on the front door, which was closed. Zoe didn't move at all, but I don't know what took me. It just woke me up, and I crawled to the door in front of me, the back door. Closed the blinds and just hold the door in place in case these guys were on the other side trying to force it. Honestly, I'm a small thin. My body was useless there, but I did it anyway. The one at the front door was still trying to enter. Zoe still not moving, the two girls upstairs doing I don't know what, and the one just a glass window away from me still hitting it, trying to force it open. It was closed, but I just grabbed the handle and hung on it for a while. He was hitting it and trying to open the door. All this lasted hours in my head, but I believe it was only a few seconds. At one point, the hits at the front door stopped. A few seconds later, the other one in front of me stopped as well. Then the lights just seemed to move fast everywhere. The alarm did nothing, so it was disabled as wanted. Zoe and I just fell asleep in the kitchen, and the two girls upstairs. Nothing happened at all. It was just over. The next day, Lisa and Anne's mom came back home. We told her everything. Got a bit yelled at because we didn't call the cops. I took it wrong at the time, but I understand now why she got so upset. She ended up calling the cops, who came to the house and discovered footprints all around the house. Some muddy footprint marks on the front door. They said he must have kicked the door. And that was it. They told us it must have been some guys who were doing some recon. You know, when they just walk up to a house to see if they can rob it. It was common in this area. There's a lot of really big and beautiful homes filled with expensive things. The only thing I'll never be able to explain is why they started being so aggressive. Originally, they just looked around the house, but I think that if they were trying to see something or just look things over, they would have left when they realized that we were inside, or at least left when the guy saw us in the kitchen. And they didn't. The moment they saw us in the kitchen, they started being aggressive and trying to force the doors to enter the house. I don't know if they really wanted to rob the house. I will never, and honestly, I don't want to know. I didn't spend any more nights at the house. I got scared that they would come back and I just couldn't sleep there. Lisa got a bit mad, like she didn't understand, but from what she told Zoe and I, she didn't see them. She just stayed upstairs with her sister. I understand it, but I wasn't able to stand the fact that she couldn't understand how scared I was as well. When I was around 15, I had started babysitting a family with 3 kids, 2 boys, 1 girl. Their mom knew me because their oldest child was friends with my little brother, and they had asked my mom if I could help them out, just because she had started taking some more shifts and her husband was doing the same. They lived right next to my high school and paid well, so I agreed, despite not really having much experience. Pretty quickly I realized it was going to be difficult. The kids were great, but I was nervous around them. The oldest was fine, just playing on his Xbox most of the time, or did homework. But the 2 youngest were a different story. The middle child, daughter, was completely obsessed with horror movies, and on more than one occasion I had to hide the knives from her since she wanted to reenact them, and the youngest son even tried to set the Christmas tree on fire. I know what kids can be like since I have a lot of younger and older cousins, but these ones drove me insane. I would constantly worry about them hurting themselves or each other. If they acted up, I would threaten to call their mom, which would normally work. It was after a few months that I realized if I mentioned their dad, that's when they would really behave and do what I had asked of them, so that's what I started doing. Now, I never really ever met the dad. I just knew that the guy was really tall and built big, but was always described to me as still being really nice, so I never really thought about it. On this occasion, I had said to the youngest boy that I would call his dad if he didn't stop misbehaving, which resulted in a huge tantrum. So I ended up calling him and explaining. Luckily for me, the dad was getting off work early, so he said that he would be home as quick as he could and apologized for his kid's behavior. When I had to explain this, the kid was sobbing and ended up locking himself in his room. That day, the dad got home and they weren't joking when they said that he was tall. I'm only 5'3" and was 15. When I saw him having to crouch a little to get through the door because of his size, I remember thinking, oh shit, no wonder these kids won't misbehave when he's here. I said hi and apologized for calling him at work, which he just brushed off and said that it needed to be done and not to worry about it. We were both sat on the couch. I can't really remember why, but I think we were talking about what days they needed me for. Now at this stage, the 2 youngest had went outside to play while I was in with the oldest, as I had been tidying up a little from dinner. I was pretty weirded out because the oldest started to get pretty antsy when asked to go to the shop. He kept making excuses to his dad, so I just offered to go. I could see that dad was visibly frustrated, and I just wanted to defuse the situation. Now, I would like to point out that everything seemed normal at this point, but I do remember feeling really intimidated by the dad. I had only met him this one time and spoke to him for no more than 20 minutes. It turns out that the oldest said to his mom that he didn't want me left alone with his dad, as apparently he had been watching me a little bit too closely during our short encounter. The parents had asked me to babysit later on this week, which I had agreed to. However, in the space of a few days, that quickly changed. I got a text from the mom apologizing for the last minute change of plans, saying that I couldn't babysit. I was a little agitated since I had changed my plans, but wasn't too bothered and just said it was fine and to let me know when she needs me again. She asked me to come around to get my payment for the last 2 weeks, and I decided to stop by before going home. As soon as I was in the house, I could tell something was off, but not wanting to pry, I just went in and said hi, talked about books for a little bit, and left. It wasn't until the next week, I think, or the week after that, where everything kicked off. I came home to my mom being upset and angry, pacing in the living room while my stepdad was trying to calm her down. I immediately went to her asking her what was wrong, feeling a little worried. Instantly, she just threw her arms around me and started crying and holding me. I was originally meant to be babysitting, but again, got canceled on, so I went home earlier than what I had said originally. I pulled away from her and asked her what was wrong again. Turns out, my mom had been trying to get a hold of me, but my phone had died. I had went to babysit and no one was home. Just decided to head back on the bus, but wasn't able to let my mom know. She sits me down and starts trying to ask me questions about the dad and my time babysitting. Confused, I mentioned that I only had met him once and had only spoken to him on the phone a handful of times when the kids were acting up. Nodding, my mom starts pressing on and asked if anything else had happened and kept questioning me, saying I could tell her anything. I just looked at her confused and told her nothing had happened and asked what was this all about. I will always remember her taking a deep breath and saying, "Oh, thank God," before letting me know what had happened. Now, as I said, the details are vague because this was on the news and I don't want to give up my information. Turns out the guy had killed someone while working and had been taken in by the police. During his interrogation, it turns out that he admitted to beating his wife and there were suspicions of other assaults. There was also mention that one of the types was a petite girl with dark hair, pale, which happened to match my description at the time, and my mom was terrified in case something had happened to me. I'm turning 23 this year and it still gives me shivers. I remember feeling like I was gonna throw up and had a sinking feeling in my stomach. My mom held me close because she had been worried sick all day and scared in the case something had happened. Needless to say, I stopped babysitting for that family right there and then. I felt so awful for the wife, as she was honestly one of the nicest women I have ever met. About a week later, I got a text from her, as it turned out I left some books, so I went over there after the phone call. When I saw her, my heart sank. She had obviously not slept and was putting on a brave face for her kids, who weren't sure what was going on. We ended up sitting in the kitchen and I just gave her a big hug, trying to comfort her. I mentioned that if she needed any help with the kids since he was gone, I would try and help, but she immediately refuses. As it turns out, people had started attacking her house. She gave me my stuff, paid for my wages, with a little more added, and said that she appreciated it, but it would be better off if I just took a step back from the family, as she didn't want me getting hurt or being associated with them. To this day, I still think about them, and it still scares me thinking about what could have happened. I still talk to the younger kids, who are now a lot older, and even help tutor the younger girl. I helped the oldest when she started high school, because I noticed kids would bully him for what his dad had done, which was awful, considering it wasn't the family's fault at all. But yeah, let's not meet, you psychopath. Years ago, I babysit for a family regularly, and conveniently, another close family friend lived right next door to the house. So when the kids I looked after were in bed, we would sit in the front garden, cup of coffee in hand, nattering over the hedge for an hour or two. We lived in a small rural village, the type where everyone knows one another, and if something was going down, the gossip spreads like wildfire. The house where I used to babysit had a terrifying 14-stone Rottweiler called Barney, which, to be honest, I wouldn't get too close to, as he seemed unpredictable. He would always be stood on his two back legs at the wrought iron gate joined to the wall of the house, growling at anyone who got too close. This house was on a housing estate, with these two particular houses being next to a footpath that led to the rest of the estate. One particular evening, the kids had gone to bed, and I was outside as usual talking to Jem over the hedge. And she mentioned something about some weird guy being seen around the village that day, but that was about the extent of it. Not long after that, a couple of local teenagers walked past and stopped to chat. It was just small talk at first, but I asked what they were up to, and the older girl of the two said, "Mom wants us to go home before it's too dark. There's some weird scuffy bloke hanging around." I told them that they should probably hurry up and side-eyed my friend. They said their goodbyes and left. Me and Jem spoke about it briefly, as she told me no one knew who he was and he hadn't been seen around here before, but he apparently was really creepy. As it got colder, we said goodnight, and I went inside to wait for the children's mom to come home from work. Shortly after, as I was watching television, Jem's dog next door starts to go berserk. I can hear him through the walls. Then seconds later, Barney, who was outside, started aggressively barking and hammering himself against the wrought iron fence to the point that the walls on each side of the building vibrated. I had never heard him so worked up like that before. He was trying to get something, and I sure as hell wasn't going to go outside to calm him down. Before I could even get up and look out the window, I heard the two boxer dogs from the next door on the other side start to go crazy. At this point, I'm at the front window, wondering what's getting them so agitated, as this seemed beyond the normal warning barks of dogs. I see some tall, unkempt guy with long straggly hair lurching down the footpath onto the estate. He wore a green style coat which billowed behind him. He passes a couple more doors up, and the dogs start aggressively yapping at him as he passes. Even more strangely, some of these dogs were inside, yet I could still hear them frantically barking. As he passed out of my view, I could tell roughly which direction he was going in, as the echo of a dozen dogs barking could be heard flaring up along his route. It was crazy how all the normal sound was drowned out by the barking. They sounded territorial and deranged. Jem called me on mobile after they had calmed down and asked me if I had seen him walking past. I told her I had and remarked about the dogs acting insane as he walked by. She also said it was weird as her dog Muttley had never acted so berserk before. We didn't know what to make of it. And as far as I'm aware, he has never been seen again after that night. I have never witnessed so many animals acting so aggressively at one individual, and I have always wondered what it was about him that made them behave the way they did. Not an overly creepy experience, but one weird night I'll never forget. So when I was around 2 or 3 years old, my mom and dad, now divorced, were friends with this couple who worked with my dad at his office. They would always ask to babysit me and loved seeing me a lot. My parents thought nothing of it. One day they asked to take me to Disney World along with their niece, and my mom had no issue with it. My dad, on the other hand, thought it was a little weird because they offered to pay for everything for me. He told them no and made up an excuse for me not to go. The couple weren't seen for weeks after that, and the company my dad and them worked for were having an investigation because the same couple who wanted to take me to Disneyland committed massive fraud and stole hundreds of thousands of dollars. They disappeared and my dad had no idea what happened to them, says he no longer works there, but he fully thinks that they wanted to take me and disappear with me. He thinks that they couldn't have kids of their own and really wanted one. It still creeps me out that I could have a completely different life and family. Thank God my dad was home because my mom wanted to let me go. By the way, just for context, as a kid, I had bright blue eyes and long curly blonde hair and looked like I could be on toddlers in tiaras, straight up. Not to toot my own horn, but I was an extremely gorgeous baby. Maybe that's why they had their eyes on me. But who knows, they could have wanted to sell me too, or worse.